going to start off, Leon, with you. I mean, in the oil space, it's certainly making news at the moment. We've heard more talk of substantial Chinese investment into this space. From reports we've seen, Western companies have been getting a pretty defensive about this. What's your analysis of what's playing out here?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting development because it's a substantial amount of money that this Chinese investment would involve. I mean, it's $50 billion, you know, so that would go a long way into massive expansion of production capacity in Nigeria. So it would have a huge impact. I think one probably needs to see it against the backdrop of the current oil reform bill that's in Parliament. And a lot of analysts are commenting, saying that this bill is likely to or may have a negative impact on existing companies because it could change the tax structure, but on the flip side it might make it easier for new companies to get in. Yeah. So, you know, the reality is that the oil sector has struggled. If you look at the long-term history of oil production in Nigeria, it's been declining for a variety of reasons. You know, but it hasn't been an industry which has really done in Nigeria exceptionally well in terms of growth, right? It's and maybe this oil bill and this investment from China might very well be you know, a catalyst to get things going again. Do
you see this bill being passed by the end of this year as it's been suggested?
It looks as though it will go through, based on the media reports. You know, I don't have a particular, you know, inside information on what the current tussling is within the parliamentary process. But at this stage, it looks as though there's a lot of political will to take it through, and that is often the most important component to get something passed.
Let's bring Kayode into this discussion now. Kayode, what are you making of the situation in the oil space at the moment?
Well, it's really a wait-and-see attitude, really. Everyone's waiting to see if the petroleum industry bill will be passed and when it will be passed and in what state it will be passed, because there will be lots of amendments that have been proposed in the oil amendment bill, in the petroleum bill, and everyone wants to see what the final draft will be and when that will be passed. So everyone's really a wait-and-see attitude.
When it comes to Chinese interest that's been shown in the oil space, I mean, there was a lot of commentary at the start of it all saying that the Nigerian government was going to be using this Chinese interest as a tool to actually squeeze more out of ties with Western companies that already operate in the region. Do you get a sense that this is what's coming to the fore in that regard?
I think the Chinese are definitely looking to lock in proven reserves, and the figure being bandied around is about 6 billion barrels of Nigerian proven reserves. But I think the government is trying to be smart in sense of trying to play Chinese off against the Western oil companies, because as been previously been said, a lot of the joint venture oil deals reached maturity, either matured last year or in end of November this year. And there were a lot of renegotiations between the Western oil companies and Nigeria about renegotiating new deals. I think that bringing in the Chinese and playing on the Chinese coming in force was a negotiating ploy by the Nigerian government. I think the Nigerian government is very wary of replacing the Chinese, between the Western oil companies and the Chinese, because Western oil companies are known to have the technical ability to improve production in Nigeria, while the Chinese have an unproven ability in that regard.
Kayode, in this context then, I mean, what kind of reaction are we seeing in terms of share price movement of these oil plays that are listed on the NSE?
Unfortunately, most of the oil companies are not listed on the NSE. The only real producing oil companies that are listed, and they're pretty small players, are Con Oil and Oando. And there's been no real movement because they're largely unaffected by these kind of discussions. Most of the joint ventures are not listed on the NSE, although people speculate that with the petroleum reform bill, the JVs will be incorporated as limited companies and possibly be listed on the NSE in the future.
Of course, just contributing to the allure of oil plays, and certainly with that prospect, as Kayode is saying, of more companies possibly listing on the NSE moving forward, investors will be interested in production. And that is one thing that has been a positive, where we've seen production increasing. It's possibly at its highest level since October last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a great story, and you know, something that's really caught me by surprise, the success of the amnesty process that's been going on and the peace negotiations that have been going on in the Delta. And we've seen positive spin-offs of that fairly quickly. You know, oil production is up from about 1.6, 1.7 million barrels of crude up to about 1.9 million barrels of crude expected in November, if you just look at what the analyst polls are saying. So it's been a very positive bounce. Look, it's sort of a long way off where it was, you know, 3 or 4 years ago. But in the short term, it's a very healthy balance. I mean, if you look at it in the context, for example, declining revenues that they've published as well, it's all very good news at this stage.
Well, Leon, talking about good health, I mean, it seems that certainly the absence of President Umar Yar'Adua at the 3-day National Economic Summit is not going to hinder developments on that front. But overall, what kind of sentiment is out there around his health and, of course, his ability to govern moving forward?
You know, presidential leadership is always an issue, you know, if you have some uncertainty around that. But in a country where you have a clear process mapped out of where you go to, you know, should some event occur that the leader can't continue to, you know, to govern forward. And this is the case in Nigeria. You have a very clear path that the vice president needs to take over, things like that. It sort of does create an element, you know, it takes away some of the uncertainty involved around, you know, whether the health of the leader. It's unfortunate, you know. It's not a happy situation for anyone when you're in this situation. But I think the country and the markets as a whole will go through it. It will of course be attached with some form of volatility, probably more in the equity market than any other market. You know, given the lack of foreign investor interest in something like, you know, the currency market or the fixed income space at this stage. But you know, it'll probably be more short-term phenomena.
Kayode, of course, this economic summit takes place next week between the 15th and the 17th of December, where it's going to be a forum that actually opens, you know, dialogue between the public, those on the ground, and those sitting at the helm of the nation. What are your expectations out of that summit next week?
I expect it to be a reaffirmation of what Nigeria needs to do to spur economic development, because the reality has been that Nigeria has shown strong growth, GDP growth figures for the last 4, 5, 6 years, but that has not trickled down to improvements for most of the populace. Most of that GDP growth, the populace hasn't seen it in either infrastructure development or in better job creation. I think what the economic summit will try and do is trying to say, okay, how can we translate GDP growth into real development that can be felt by majority of the populace, and also through infrastructure development.
On that note, let's